Between 1863 and 1874, London was home to a remarkable underground network that most people today have never heard of. Beneath the city streets, a series of iron tubes carried capsule trains powered by air pressure, delivering letters, parcels, and government documents at speeds that rivaled anything above ground. This was the Pneumatic Dispatch Company's bold attempt to revolutionize urban logistics with cutting-edge Victorian technology. It wasn't science fiction, it was real, and for a time, it worked. The concept had caught fire across Europe. Engineers believed that compressed air could do what steam and telegraph wires couldn't: move physical cargo quickly, cleanly, and reliably. Some even proposed building pneumatic tunnels under the English Channel, linking London to Paris by air-driven mail within minutes. That particular dream never left the drawing board, but in London, the idea took hold in a more grounded form. Backed by inventors and supported by major institutes like the post office and railway companies, the Pneumatic Dispatch Company built an operational system connecting Euston Station, the General Post Office, Holborn, and beyond. It was compact, fast, and astonishingly modern for its time, but in less than a generation, the whole thing just disappeared. So what went wrong? Why did it fail? And more importantly, what, if anything, still remains? Stay tuned to find out as we discover the story of the London Pneumatic Dispatch Company. I'm your host, Ryan Socash, and you're watching It's History. In the mid-19th century, London was already a dense, fast-growing metropolis, crowded, chaotic, and increasingly dependent on speed. The city's financial institutions, shipping firms, and government offices operated on a paper-based system, meaning bills of lading, contracts, and confidential memos had to be moved across town daily. At the time, most of it traveled by hand. Messengers darted between post offices and train stations on foot or horseback, in the process weaving through congested streets lined with carts, omnibuses, and crowds. Needless to say, delays were routine and brutal. Accuracy and security were also an issue with this system. But then the telegraph, introduced in the 1840s, solved some of these issues, but not all of them. Telegraphy could send information, but not actual items or signed papers that legal and commercial transactions still required. London needed something faster than a messenger, but more tangible than a wire. Enter Pneumatic Dispatch. The idea of sending physical capsules through underground tubes using compressed air or vacuum pressure. The principle wasn't new, as George Medhurst had proposed the concept as early as 1810, and patents continued to emerge over the following decades. But it wasn't until the 1850s and 60s that the idea became technically feasible and economically tempting. Engineers in Paris, Berlin, and New York had all begun testing local dispatch tubes for mail and telegram slips. Among the first to envision a full-scale London system was the French engineer Jean-Baptiste Berlier. In 1885, he published plans to link Paris and London by pneumatic tubes across the Channel. His proposal included a 2.5-meter diameter tunnel running from the French coast to Dover, capable of sending parcels in under an hour. Though it was never built, it did illustrate just how far the ambitions for this technology had reached. Though more precisely, British engineers began looking at London itself. Josiah Latimer Clark, chief engineer to the Electric Telegraph Company, had already experimented with short pneumatic links between the stock exchange and the nearby telegraph office. His early system used narrow tubes, vacuum suction, and leather-sealed capsules. They worked, but only over a short distance. The real leap would come from Thomas Webster Ramil and the Samuda brothers. Ramil was a civil engineer with an eye for grand schemes, whereas Jacob and Joseph Samuda had a track record in atmospheric railway design. In 1859, Ramil patented a system for transporting letters and small goods underground. Hence, with major financial backing by some of the largest tycoons of the day, the Pneumatic Dispatch Company was formed. Their goal wasn't just a demonstration, it was to build an operational network across London that could serve the post office, the railways, and commercial clients. By 1861, they had the route, the plan, and the political support. Construction was about to begin. Construction of the London pneumatic system began in earnest in 1861. The first tunnel stretched from Euston Station to the Northwestern District Post Office near Holborn, just under a third of a mile long. The work was commissioned by the Pneumatic Dispatch Company and designed by Thomas Webster Ramil, who adapted his earlier atmospheric railway concept to fit London's cramped subterranean environment. Now, the line that ran beneath Euston Road was cut by hand through the clay, with a brick-lined tunnel measuring 3 feet in diameter and laid 10 to 15 feet below the surface. The tube wasn't circular. It had a horseshoe cross-section just wide enough to accommodate a capsule train running on narrow-gauged rails. Now, the capsules themselves, known as carriers, were about 2 feet in diameter and 4 to 5 feet long. Each was mounted on wheels and sealed with flanges lined in felt to keep air pressure consistent. Furthermore, they were built to carry up to 35 bags of letters or parcels at a time. To power the system, engineers installed a steam-powered air pump at each end. One created a vacuum to pull the capsules through, and the other could push them using compressed air. Speeds reached up to 30 miles per hour. And at that pace, the total journey time between two stations was just under a minute, which was way quicker than anything that could be achieved above the ground. Tests showed that the system could move 12,000 letters in a single dispatch. With that in mind, track laying continued throughout the end of 1862, and a trial line from the sorting office to Holborn opened to internal testing soon thereafter. Additional branches were planned. By 1863, the company had mapped out routes from Euston to Holborn, then from Holborn to the General Post Office. The total system was planned to span several miles, with junctions at key transport and postal hubs. Public anticipation built steadily as word spread in newspapers and engineering journals. The project was praised for its speed, economy, and potential to modernize mail delivery in Britain's capital. And then, in June of 1863, after nearly 2 years of tunneling, pipe installation, and system calibration, the Pneumatic Dispatch Company held its official opening ceremony at Holborn. Government officials, post office managers, and members of the press gathered to witness this new technology in action. A capsule was loaded with mailbags, sealed into the entry tube, and launched towards Euston with a sharp hiss of compressed air. Seconds later, it arrived at the far end intact, undamaged, and on time. And with that, the system was declared operational. The Pneumatic Dispatch Company began their regular operations in 1863. A private enterprise from the onset, it owned the entire system, the tunnels, the capsule trains, and the steam-driven air pumps that powered them. The British General Post Office was its first and only major client, contracting the company to move mail between key locations within London. The system worked well. It accelerated the internal transfer of mail and removed logistical bottlenecks between rail depots and the city's postal infrastructure. The system operated on a fixed schedule, handling thousands of letters per day. Foreign engineers from around the world visited to study it. Technical journals tracked its progress, but surprisingly, it never expanded beyond this core loop. And then reality set in, as the operational difficulties mounted. For starters, the tunnels required constant maintenance. Joints leaked, water seeped in, capsules frequently jammed or arrived damaged. Not to mention the steam engines were labor-intensive and expensive to run. Engineers developed elaborate workarounds, trap chambers to catch condensation, rotating valves, and pressure reservoirs, but none solved the structural limits of the system. And we should also point out that the public awareness remained low. Remember, the entire operation was basically invisible to the people it served. As far as most were concerned, the mailbags just disappeared into a hatch and then re-emerged at the other end. In other words, the system never really became a part of urban imagination. The end came in 1874, when the General Post Office, no longer willing to absorb the high cost of ongoing failures, terminated the contract. The company, with no alternative clients and no state support, shut down soon after. Its machinery was sold off, the tunnels were sealed, and the system was dismantled in parts and forgotten in others. However, years later, the idea of an underground mail transport in London would return, though this time under state control. In 1927, the post office inaugurated a fully electric narrow-gauge railway designed specifically for parcel transport. The London Post Office Railway, known today as Mail Rail. It was larger, more reliable, and stayed in service until the early 21st century. But that's probably a story for another day. My main point is that the Pneumatic Dispatch Company had come first. It had built something entirely new and ahead of its time. Today, almost nothing remains of the Pneumatic Dispatch Company's original infrastructure, at least not in any visible or accessible form. After the system was shut down in 1874, most of the equipment was dismantled, the tunnels were sealed and engines were sold off, and the stations, well, those were decommissioned. What happened underground, however, is a little more complicated. Although some sources do speculate that elements of the cast iron and brick-lined tunnels are likely still buried beneath modern streets and infrastructure. The primary route has never officially been excavated or even mapped in full since the closure, though at least one confirmed incident suggests that the system was not entirely removed. In 1928, an explosion occurred in a disused pneumatic tunnel, and the culprit was apparently a buildup of trapped gases. That incident hinted at the survival of sealed-off segments, but no formal investigation followed. Remember, the tunnels were private property, and after their liquidation, they were removed from the public record. It's possible, though unverified, that portions were absorbed into other subterranean networks, like the mail rail or London's broader communication infrastructure. Indeed, some sources note that old pneumatic pipes in London were repurposed in the late 20th century for carrying things like fiber optic cables or electric lines, particularly by Mercury Communications in the 1980s. However, these were likely drawn from other, later small bore networks, which are far different than the large diameter system built by the forever lost Pneumatic Dispatch Company. I like to think that in a city where so much history is hidden underground, the pneumatic dispatch tunnels may still be there, but for now, they belong to the unknown. Until next time, I'm Ryan Socash, signing off.